Welcome back to Creating Cooperative Kids. I'm your host, Bill Corbett. Have you ever noticed how you feel when things get cluttered and disorganized? You kind of lose your motivation to do much about it. Well, our children are equally affected when their environment is disorganized and chaotic. They can easily become overwhelmed with the chaos, which causes their behavior to become difficult for us to manage. On top of that, they weren't born with our organizational skills, and they need us to teach them how to get organized. So I turned to an expert in this area to help us get our children better organized at home. Rick Wood says he started organizing things when he was 8 years old and hasn't stopped since. He's the owner of the Functional Organizer and is the president of the National Association of Professional Organizers of Connecticut. Rick is a happily married dad with 2 children, ages 13 and 10, and conducts various workshops on managing clutter and time management. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Thank you.
I read this psychological report one time that every item that is around and not put away somewhere says, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up. And the psychologist said it's like having a toddler around you, keep pestering you, wanting you to pick them up.
Correct. Everything we own is energy. And it can be positive energy or negative energy. And when there's a lot of clutter around the house, on the floor, and places where they shouldn't be, that's a lot of negative energy. So it creates a lot of stress for the parents and the kids alike.
So we understand the reason I start out with this is because I want parents to understand what it feels like inside for us. And when we start with what it feels like for us, it's easier for us to connect with our children. So the important thing is helping children get organized. What recommendations do you have for parents?
Well, the first step is you want to have a place for everything. And kids are used to being in school. They're used to having a spot to put their coat when they get to school, a spot to put their backpack. Do the same thing at home. Have a spot for the coat, for the backpack, for your hat, gloves, for your footwear. Place right at the entryway so they know exactly where to find it every day.
You know, I want to add something. I love that. And so I would assume that you set it up with the child in the beginning, maybe even mark it, right? Put it
Correct.
like a label on it. And then every time the child isn't putting that thing somewhere, my methodology says all you do is you say backpack.
There you go.
One very clean, clear word rather than I'm sick and tired of you leaving stuff out, which is more clutter, right?
Exactly, and that helps with the homework as well. I mean, if they finish their homework, they put it in the backpack, put it back on the hook so it's ready for the next day.
All right, so I agree with you, and I found that works for me too. If you find a place to keep stuff, then it's less likely for it to be all over the place. What else?
One more thing to that. If you don't have a hook or a place to put your jacket or your backpack, then they're just going to throw it on the floor, and they're not going to find it. So that's the whole point of having that.
Oh, okay. Right. What other tips do you have?
Zones. Zones are very important and organized. Probably the number one principle is zones. Think of a kindergarten classroom. We've all been in kindergarten. Remember those days? Reading zones, art zones, zones where you could build blocks, craft time, puppet imagination time. Different zones within the kindergarten classroom. If you could take that strategy, implement it into your house, into a kid's bedroom or in their playroom, and think of zones. A little reading section in their bedroom, a little section for toys. That way they're not scattered throughout the whole room.
And that's a good point. A lot of times parents are challenged with space because they live in small houses or apartments. I do a lot of training helping parents set up timeout spaces, what timeout was intended to be, not as punishment, a place for a child to go to calm down. But the first complaint I get is, yeah, you try living in a 2-bedroom apartment and set up a special place. I like to tell parents, keep the toys out of the bedroom, because the bedroom should be a place that's conducive to peacefulness, calmness. Do you have any suggestions on where do you put up if you follow that guideline and no toys in the bedroom, where can they set up toys? Any ideas?
Well, you can have a designated play area in a separate room, if you can do that. If not, try to take a piece of that room, like I said, a zone. Maybe just a corner of their bedroom or a corner of the living room or a corner of an extra room that you have in the house that you can use just for the kids so they know where to go when they're looking to play with that toy.
And that's a good point. I think we can make better use of partitions. And for the parent who says, sorry, I don't have the money to spend on partitions, that's nice. Get cardboard boxes. The dumpsters are filled with them, right?
Exactly.
That create a little zone,
Sure.
like you said.
Yep.
And then parents complain to me and they say, and I love being a wise guy with parents, and they say, oh yeah, well, I don't have much space for a play area zone. And I go, and then they said, because that's my living room. And I said, you know what? You decided to have kids. You can have the nice living room someday down the road, but right now you got little children, you got to have that place for them to play.
And the zone's going to keep you from having toys throughout every room and causing more chaos and maybe even accidents where you could trip over something.
Right. You also talk about boxing it and labeling it and storing it.
Sure. Boxing it, labeling it, storing it. you want to try to use clear bins for the kids because then they can see what's inside them. Try to contain smaller items in clear bins and label what's on it, what's inside there, and keep it at a low level so they can reach it. And make sure when your child plays with something, they put it back when they're done. Because if they don't put it back every time, that's when the clutter starts building up throughout the room, and maybe even to other rooms, and it doesn't go back to that zone that you specified for them.
And I like the idea of the clear bins, because then they can see. I would even, I might, as a parent educator, I might interject and separate the things between the chaos toys and the easy to pick up toys. Like
Sure.
the chaos toys, the ones with little tiny pieces and parts, like the Legos, that would be in a clear box, but like out of their reach, they have to ask permission to get it down. That way the parent's in charge of
Yes,
that, right?
because that can really be a big mess, as we all know, especially with the Legos.
Yeah, and you step on them at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
and,
not fun.
Yeah. You say finish what you started.
Yes, it's all about focus. It's all about doing one thing at a time. Leading back to what Abby was saying earlier, and what you were saying earlier about internet and phone usage and this and that, we want to make sure we're focusing on one thing at a time. In the world we live in now, there's so much multitasking going on with parents and kids. Try to get back to that focus. Mentioning before, the meals at dinner time, spending time with your kids and not bringing out the phone, right? And making sure you're focusing on them. They need to do the same thing with their toys. Play with one thing at a time. And when you're done with it, put it back. And then bring out the next thing. Play with it, put it back. Instead of trying to bring out 3 or 4 toys at once and then not cleaning it up, and then it becomes a hectic, chaotic mess.
And then we ADHD parents are a bad example. We got so many projects all started at one time. I like that you say that we should review the toy inventory.
Yes.
A couple times a year. Tell us about
Very
that.
important. If you don't review your toy inventory, the clutter builds up. So it's very important to try to purge at least twice a year if you can. Usually around the birthday time when they get a few extra toys, and around the holiday time when they get a few extra toys. If you could tell them, hey, you know what? There's a child who's a little less fortunate out there that can use this item that you're not using anymore. They'll be more susceptible to donate it, and they'll actually become excited about it.
Yeah.
And you could even play a game with them. You could say, you know what? Here's a bag. You got 10 minutes. See how many things you can collect in that bag. Or if you have a couple kids, have them compete against each other. Whoever gets the most, will win a prize.
And I really like the fact that you suggest donating it. We have a lot of agencies that can use toys or gently used toys for those who don't. You also talk about, we only got a couple minutes, but the hand-me-down system.
Yes, the hand-me-down system is very important. It's great for the family, the nuclear family, as well as the family outside the family, sisters and brothers who can also use items. Now, the trick with the hand-me-down system is there's always so many clothes in a kid's closet, it's hard for them to grab what they need when they get old enough to change themselves. And they're less likely to get what they need. They'll grab the same shirt over and over again if they can't get to the other items. So you want to try to make sure you're purging those items and taking them down by age, by gender, and separating them and putting them in little boxes and labeling them. And if they're clear bins, it's even better. And you stick them at the top of your closet for the age group coming up in the next couple of years. So it'll be ready when they go to move into those clothes once again.
So I would assume, we're about out of time, but I assume families can seek out their local organizer.
Yes.
And they can actually, as a consultant that comes in and helps them set up those systems to make them work.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for the tips
you, Bill.
offered today. I think the parents will really appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
Especially the springtime. It's time to clean and organize.
Yes, it is. Spring cleaning.
Excellent. Now that you have some ideas on how to get your kids better organized at home, what about at school? My next guest says she's got that covered and will be sharing some suggestions for helping kids get organized around homework that will carry forward to their schoolwork as well. You'll learn more on the other side of this break, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back.